The left is letting out their radical rage by torching Teslas and taking over Trump Tower. The NYPD arresting nearly 100 anti-Israel protesters who stormed the lobby of the president's home in New York City, just a few blocks from here, demanding the release of ex-Columbia student and Ivy League protest ringleader Mahmoud Khalil. And that's not the only target. Violent attacks on Tesla dealerships are ramping up as it becomes a proxy for anger at Elon Musk and Doge. President Trump vowing to label the violence as domestic terrorism. But instead of just calling out the anarchy, some folks want to condemn how Trump is cracking down on them.
You're either with the Tesla or you're with the terrorists?
Trump thinks that if you try to kill cops to overthrow the government and change an election, that's not domestic terrorism, but somehow having a protest in front of a Tesla dealership is.
Just to be clear, you protest a private company, you are labeled by this administration a domestic terrorist.
But they loved him before they hated him. Many are pointing out how Musk was once a darling of the media.
Musk, a.k.a. real-life Iron Man.
Elon Musk is doing things that may revolutionize transportation and climate change.
Staggeringly rich and staggeringly intelligent.
Wonderful, out of this world, incredible images from the first all-civilian orbit around Earth. A huge win for Elon Musk.
As a leader in science and technology whose name may indeed belong alongside those of Edison and Jobs.
Judge, earlier today, Caroline Levitt said that the only reason Democrats changed their minds on Tesla is because Elon Musk changed his mind on Donald Trump. And I think Musk has said similar. He's like, well, they used to love me. Not anymore.
Well, the truth is that the left is so full of hate, and they still haven't figured out why they lost the election. And their hypocrisy knows no bounds. Just like we heard, if they love Elon Musk because he's a wonderful person, they will hate him not because of anything that he's done, but because of who he's aligned himself with. And this is classic left over there going into Trump Tower, which certainly is a public area, but they are there trespassing at some point when they're told to leave. They're there obstructing the police and the police's effort to get them out of there. And they're there resisting arrest because they're there because they believe in Mahmoud Khalil. And they want Mahmoud to have all of his constitutional rights, a guy who's been in the country for 2 years, who believes in the takedown of Western civilization and who hates Israel and pretty much hates all of our Western values. Everything they're doing is backwards. It's not making sense. It's not normal. And for them to die on this hill, as opposed to any of the other hills that we would understand, Lake and Riley, men and women's sports, little DJ, they figure that Mahmoud Khalil, the guy they're all promoting, who's been here for 2 years from Syria, who pretty much is, cooperating and working with a foreign terrorist organization, is the way to get back into America's heart.
But can you do a quick thing for everybody about the labeling of the attacks at Tesla plants as domestic terrorism? Does that label fit?
Well, you know what? The label does fit, but I think the president said, I think it could be domestic terrorism. He didn't say it would certainly be.
Gotcha.
I imagine that it depends. I mean, the violence that we're hearing about is, Molotov cocktails, arsons. I mean, and it's coordinated, and there's a conspiracy. I mean, depends on the facts.
Got you. Jessica, can you imagine 10 years ago if someone had said that Republicans would be showcasing electric cars on the White House lawn and the president would be like, I'm going to buy one, John Hannity is going to buy one, and that the Democrats would be firebombing electric vehicle dealerships?
It has been a crazy decade on many levels. I wouldn't have guessed that Donald Trump would be our president round one, let alone round two. So times they are a-changing. Putting aside the Molotov cocktails and graffiti and all that, and if they're breaking laws, then they should be pursued to the fullest extent of the law. But not buying Teslas or selling your Tesla, that's putting the free market to work. That's what people do when they're not happy with a brand anymore. Dylan Mulvaney after the Budweiser can, Kid Rock out there shooting those cans, people smashing Keurigs. This is...
Yeah, Peter hasn't bought Gillette in like 10 years.
Right. So that's how the market is supposed to work. And people are sending a message to Elon Musk that, yes, maybe 5-6 years ago, they thought, he's going up there with Edison, but right now they don't like what Doge is doing. They think he has too much power within the government, and they're speaking with their checkbooks. And that feels perfectly reasonable in how the free market should work.
Jesse, I was watching the protesters today at Trump Tower, and I never get over this feeling of like, I've never in my life had time to do that. Never. I've worked since high school. I would have to achieve. I have hobbies. I have a life. I can't even conceive of going and doing something like
I'm
this.
starting to realize these people might not have jobs, Dana. And I'm starting to realize they might be getting paid to protest. And Will Kane showed Open Society, Soros is funding it. And that's fine. I love it. The more you guys make fools of yourselves, the better it is for moi. A couple years ago, Musk was saving the planet. He was going to other planets. And he was in love with the Democrats. They were both in love. And then they had this horrible breakup. But Musk says he didn't change, they changed. He was always about free enterprise and free speech. They went full wacko. They tried to transition one of his kids. And then he buys Twitter and realized that they were censoring everybody. And then he sees Trump get shot. It kind of gives him a political awakening, and he goes all in. And Trump gets elected. He comes in. He wants to make the government more efficient at great expense to himself and his company, and finds out the Democrats are stealing from the government. So he caught him censoring you, and then he caught him stealing from you, and he's humiliated them. This is not your average breakup. This is like you hit him where it hurts. And now the Democrats don't have the emotional intelligence to kind of reconcile this breakup, so they just oppose everything in a blind rage. It makes no sense. Donald Trump and Elon Musk have made them support shutdowns. They're against peace. They're against green cars. They're against women. It's weird, and we're watching it unfold. Now they're supporting an anti-Semite. This is a guy, he's not even American. He comes here, he hates Jews, he blows up Colombia, cost them $400 million, and they're out there like this guy's Gandhi. And so have at it, left. Keep going.
Greg, it kind of reminded me of all the protests you would see at like the World Trade Organization and like all the sort of anarchists, anti-capitalism.
There might be some stuff behind that, though. But first, we got to stop referring to this guy as a student.
Yeah,
he's
a man.
31. I mean, if Charles Manson took a night course, would we refer to him as a student? No, he was a murderer. This guy is an agent, let's be honest. You know, remember, you can look at what USAID did in other countries, you know, fomenting color revolutions. What's he doing here? Issues. It's not about Doge. None of these people are upset about Doge. They don't even pay attention. Like you said, these are people who aren't really part of an everyday normal society. You know what I always do when I check out these protests? I look for one thing: attractive people. None there. None. Mostly young, female, and homely. There are a few guys in there, you know, speckled into the stereotypical goateed cream puff, but they might have been women too. And they're talking about Nazis. Well, who are the Nazis by their definition? Because once they claim you're a Nazi, they will do whatever they want to you. Some said the protesters were Jews, but will the media check that? I doubt it. And they will not check. The media will also not check who paid for those signs, who paid for those T-shirts, and as you said, who paid for the protesters. This protest, all these protesters are as organic as a Twinkie. This is not real. This is a manufactured activity to create the delusion of a movement. I don't think Democrats should be heartened by this, to be seen as the party of the tantrum. You know, all this explosion of negative energy is compared to the other side, which is this consistent optimism and positivity. Things are happening. We just had a temporary truce between Russia and Ukraine. We've watched illegal immigration slow to a trickle. The government is getting a much-needed audit on behalf of the taxpayers, not on behalf of the politicians. And it's driven by the most energetic, optimistic leader you've probably seen in a generation, even more. And what do you got? Mercenaries of misery who just go out there and disrupt because they have all this frickin' free time. Makes you wonder that, you know, it's funny. Why are leftists so politically chaotic, intimidating, and unhinged? You can mention January 6th, but the exception proves the rule. That was one moment. You know, the left has had 50-plus years of political unrest. And it goes back, and I think it answers your question. There's an aimlessness when you become a leftist. And the aimlessness is aided and abetted by a political narcissism, where you're told yourself matters, which is why they elevate trans activism and Hamas terrorists. Then you get to the whole Musk thing. The contradiction and the inconsistencies in their support for him are based primarily on the fact of aimlessness. They wake up every morning without a plan. They could love you one minute and hate you the next, because underneath it all, they have no real purpose in life. And it's miserable. So the lifestyle of the activists you see is unkempt, broke, emotional, just unhappy. I'm going to stop there. I was going to quote the Bible, but I think I'll save that for the next segment.
Is the next block? We'll save the Bible.
They're like the prodigal son.
We are here protesting against the defamation and deprivation of Mahmoud by Donald Trump. You know, I don't really understand what Donald Trump's intentions are, and I won't speak for them, but I will say that the impact is causing a lot of harm to people who are asking for peace.
So there's that. Katie Pavlich joins us with her reaction. But first, let's get an update from the New York City Police, from the chief of the department, John Schell. Chief, good to have you here today. What can you tell us about what the law enforcement in New York confronted today? Did these people go peacefully? What was it like in there?
So, Martha, how you doing? I'll put this on a timeline for you. Roughly about 11:30, we had 150 protesters in small groups of 7 in different times coming both entrances of Trump Towers in civilian clothes. Once they were inside, they took off their clothes, and they had matching red shirts with different sayings supporting Palestine. We know this group very well, and this is their MO. Within 10 minutes of that, notifications went out, and we responded. And once I got here as the incident commander, the goal was real simple for us: secure the perimeter of Trump Towers, get with Secret Service and Trump Security, make sure everyone in the building is secure. And once we had that, you know, this is a public access area. So we had to get permission from Trump Security, which we did, to make these arrests. We gave warnings, and ultimately, of the roughly 150 that we hear, 98 chose to stay in the cafeteria area. We made those arrests. Those arrests would be for violation, trespass, but also obstructing government administration and resisting arrest, which are Class A misdemeanors due to the fact that we had to carry them out. I will say from start to finish, this was a 2-hour operation making 98 arrests, and there were no incidents in terms of anyone getting hurt, property damage. You know, the NYPD, like you mentioned October 7th earlier, we've handled over 5,000 these protests in all different shapes and sizes, and our professionalism training showed through today. And like I said, 2 hours, we got this cleared up.
Do you have any idea who this group is, or who pays for these T-shirts? Who organized it all? Any idea?
Yeah, we're well versed in this group. I don't want to give them any advertisement. We've dealt with them before. We know what their MO is, if you will. And again, I just can't stress enough that in 2 hours we got this cleared up. You know, 98 people. We had to carry people up escalators and walk them out. It's not the easiest thing to do in the world, but our training and our professionalism through our cops, we do this very well in New York City.
Indeed you do. Thank you so much, Chief Schell. Always good to see you. Thank you for what you do to keep the people of New York City safe. And as you say, 5,000 protests of this kind in the past year or so since October 7th is extraordinary.
Protesters in New York City have found a new favorite address, and they are occupying not just the streets outside, which you can see this is a chopper shot that we cannot take control over. So we wish that this helicopter would pull out, because you'll see people at the top of the screen beyond our banners. There are many of them. Some of them have made their way into occupying the lobby at Trump Tower. This is in protest of the arrest and detainment of Mahmoud Khalil. Remember, he is a graduate student who was on the campus of Columbia University professing hate. We know that he was a very high-profile face, along with groups on that campus who are pro-Hamas on Columbia. And when ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, picked him up, the protesting began. Now, some of it has not looked like protected speech or protests. It's looked more violent than that, as people have pressed physically against NYPD officers in this city. Let's watch the video now. This is what happened inside. And can you hear them chanting? Listen carefully as we go to that. Free Mahmoud, free them all. So you hear them chanting, free Mahmoud, free them all. I'm wondering, Ari, who are they all? And if the world is watching our nation right now, and they know us as you know, a bastion of free speech, so on and so forth, when you hate, when people feel under threat because of what you're saying, that's actually not protected speech.
That's right.
And look at some of the signage in here. I mean, they hate Israel, they hate Jewish Americans, they are anti-American.
I'll make 2 big points here. One, I'm going to start with the speech facade, the myth that this is about speech. What happened to Mahmoud Khalil had nothing to do with speech. It has everything to do with creating an encampment that is where Zionists are prohibited, where Jewish students are not allowed to walk on their own campus. These are crimes. These are deportable events. These are things that we would never tolerate. As for all these people who are now in Trump Tower, I hope that this administration will do what the Biden administration did to the January 6 people who walked inside the Capitol. They have the technology, get their faces, match it up with the database, and if any of them are non-citizens, every one of them is trespassing. They all should be deported from this country, too.
But wouldn't they be trespassing anyway if they are causing people to fear? There are people who pay to live in that residence. There are businesses on that floor of the lobby. This is not a safe situation. If you are Jewish in that building, do you feel safe?
Well, whether you feel safe, don't feel safe, whatever the legal remedy is to give the State Department under Marco Rubio's leadership, who took action against Mahmoud Khalil,
at a federal level,
any of these people are not citizens. They should be deported. We have to have a new way of approaching this. The streets of New York have got to stop getting shut down on a regular basis, interfering with ambulances and fire departments and people trying to get to their jobs. We don't have to have mayhem in our streets because these people, the face of the Democrat Party, are pro-Hamas.
Well, and this looks like, Lisa, this looks like what we saw in Columbia University last year with the tents. Those T-shirts were printed. Come on, this is not an accident that people with identical T-shirts show up at Trump Tower and then they occupy the lobby. I mean, coincidence is interesting. It's just usually not applicable.
Well, yeah, I mean, they hate Israel, obviously, in the West. But I think it's hilarious that they believe this is going to have any impact on President Trump, a guy who survived an assassination attempt and then took the stage at the Republican National Convention just days later. So this is going to have zero impact on him. He's not swayed at all. So you're wasting your time, people out in the streets. But look at who the left makes their heroes, right? This guy.
Yes.
Hamas, George Floyd, Jacob Blake, a guy who pulled a knife on a police officer. So they have some strange heroes. And then look who they won't stand up for when you look at President Trump's speech to Congress, a 13-year-old with cancer, Laken Riley, right? So this tells you everything about their values, and they're totally misaligned with the rest of America.
Look, there was a representative we had on the show last week, Representative Gooden of Texas, and he was the person who ripped the sign out that said this is not normal as President Trump was walking into that joint congressional address. And he said, look, when you've had enough, you've just had enough. So America has had enough. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and President Trump have had enough. Will the Democrats ever have enough of this kind of hate?
Yeah, I watched a video of one of Mahmoud Khalil's. I mean, he has like a dozen attorneys.
It's a lot.
Appeared to be an attorney saying that the wife said, my husband was kidnapped. Okay, the American government does not kidnap people, first of all. Your husband is getting his student visa taken away. And you mentioned Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who said, this is not about free speech. Nobody has a right to a student visa. Nobody has a right to a green card. And that is exactly right. You put the statute on your show, Harris, the Immigration and Nationality Act, I believe it was yesterday. If you are suspected of articulating a viewpoint or pushing forward or helping a terrorist group, there are different nuances with the exact wording. You can get your visa yanked away. And by the way, the Supreme Court is very friendly to arguments about national security as it pertains to the federal government.
Excellent point.
It is their purview.
Section 237A4C of the Immigration and Nationality Act, if you should want to look it up. I try to read it out loud every day.
By the way, he wasn't kidnapped. He's getting a free flight to Syria. He shouldn't have complained.
Well, I mean, he was
born in Syria.
Born there. Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
Look, Emily, as we look at this, though, and read those signs. Fight Nazis, not students. So does that make the rest of us in America Nazis? What are they even doing right now?
Well, I just point out, too, how tragically misguided this is in terms as well of that coverage and amplification. So they are saying free Mahmoud. What about free Adon Alexander, who was the United States American hostage who is still in the clutches of Hamas? How about freeing the remains of the 4 additional American bodies that are there? The urgency, the intensity, and the congealed nature of this, the fervor. I wish there would just be an iota of that would get even more coverage of the Americans that are still there. And I've been trying to read what their T-shirts say. And on the back it says, Jews say stop. I can't read the bottom too, but there have been shirts out there that say stop arming Israel. And I know that there are plenty of printed that in these similar protests that say Jews say stop arming Israel. To your point about the signs that say fight Nazis, not students, what about fight Hamas?
Yes.
I mean,
they're not going to do that.
The whole reality, and this goes back to our, by the way, our A-block discussion of the Democratic Party, because Rahm Emanuel purposefully did not go to any Ivy League campus as he's going out there and talking about this, right? These are bastion and fomenting grounds for this kind of ideology, patently unacceptable, and those people are trespassing.
Yeah, but this is personal now. That's Trump Tower. That bears his name. Think about all the people who've gone after Trump, not just as president, but previously. All the lawfare against him. Letitia James, the Attorney General of the state, the governor, Kathy Hochul. Think about the people who have gone after him. This is his tower bearing his name. They would love it if his name were not on anything in the city. That's what the district attorney and AG and the state of New York and New York City were trying to do. They couldn't win on that. So this is all part of that bigger sort of gestalt view, if you will, of Donald Trump and his leadership in this country from a side that would rather we not have real freedom in this country. Because real freedom isn't just for the people that you like, it's for everybody. There, but by the grace of God, go any of us if Jewish Americans are afraid when they go to sleep tonight because of the stuff that's happening on the streets of some of our cities. I want to bring in now Eric Sean. Eric.
Yeah, we're here live on the corner of 57th and 5th. There is Trump Tower. There have been some arrests already of some protesters who were sitting in the heart of the Trump organization, taking their message to President Trump in Washington. It is the group Voice, a Jewish Voice for Peace. They have been demanding that Mahmoud Khalil be freed and not be deported, and they are also been calling for no walls either in Mexico or in the Middle East. As you can see here, some of the protesters are gathered on the side after they voluntarily came out, but we've seen protesters arrested already. The police, NYPD, have their zip ties ready as these protesters, with their message that they've been carrying around New York City in various areas. There is someone being arrested right now, walking backwards, and you hear the cheers. You hear the cheers from the protesters as more arrests are coming out. Those are the people who decided to stay in the lobby, the pink marbled lobby of Trump Tower, as well. Others are here. Let's just listen to their chant for just a moment.
Palestinians have the right to live in freedom.
Those here have been saying basically that Mahmoud Khalil has been exercising his First Amendment rights and should not be deported. Of course, the Trump administration says that he is aligned with the terrorist group Hamas, and that's why Secretary of State Marco Rubio says under the law, as the Secretary of State, he has the right to deport Mr. Khalil. His wife gave a plaintiff plea saying that her husband only cares about Palestinian people, and he's been fighting for the Palestinian people. So that is the scene right here on Fifth Avenue at the corner of Fifth Avenue and 57th Street. Let's go in right here to a news conference. Let's listen. Why are you here, ma'am? I'm with Fox. Why not? I'm with the news department at Fox. Why not? You're broadcasting to people on the
Eric, we have lost all of your audio. I know you're walking and you are corded. You are not wireless, I would imagine. So we are losing you. We're losing sound of you and the people around you. We will come back to you, Eric Shawn, if you can hear the sound of my voice as soon as we can. I do want to get to this. So we know that they are making arrests inside that lobby right now. We can't see this. The video that you're seeing right now is from moments ago. So we are not able to contemporaneously show you those arrests. That doesn't mean that there won't be video later, but right now that is playing out. And I would imagine that the shouts that we could hear outside from that group when Eric Shawn lowered his voice so that we could hear the hate on the streets. And yes, they are for Mahmoud Khalil, a man known to lead high-profile protests against Israel, against Jewish Americans, and many of them aligned with pro-Hamas. Okay, they are declared a terrorism organization by President Trump. By the federal government, they are terrorists. And Khalil and others have been in those groups. Now, we can't say exactly who wrote what sign and printed the T-shirts and all of that. I personally want to look into that and see if there are any sorts of connections to what we saw last year. There was a lot of money flowing onto those Ivy League campuses for all those tents. All right, the arrests now. Now we're seeing, this is live. Let's see if we can get the camera up right and straight again. They are taking people out of that lobby now. And Ari, this is exactly what you said needs to happen. And next steps with Ari Fleischer on the couch with us today would be a top-down approach from the Secretary of State, from the federal government. And that section of the Immigration and Nationality Act law, Section 237A4C, that says that Secretary Rubio has found that Khalil's presence and activities in the U.S. would have potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences for the U.S. Secretary of State has the latitude to kick anybody out for any reason who's here on a student visa or a green card.
Well, first and foremost, it is utterly distressing that after the October 7th attack, the biggest killing of Jews since the Holocaust, that there is a movement inside the United States that is pro-Hamas. I mean, it is beyond me how any group of Americans, if they're American, or non-citizens can be in this country and be pro-Hamas. And we have to remedy that. And the way you remedy it is to recognize, one, Fifth Avenue is shut down. That's a violation of the law. These people are illegally trespassing inside private property, Trump Tower. Deport them. Use whatever technology we need. This is playing perfectly into the hands of the Rubio and the Trump administration, who says we're not putting up with this. There's a new sheriff in town.
Well, look, sheriffs, deputies, whoever it takes, we want people arrested and for the right thing to be done. And some of that with NYPD police officers. Look to the left of your screen. That is a live look of people being carted out by law enforcement. They are taking them out. Look, if we didn't see enough of that movement on campuses last year, of students being held accountable, this is more of the same. But the difference that has to happen now, Lisa, you can't just let them go in a soft on crime policy district attorney's office. You can't say that we aren't going, because I thought Paul Morrow was here earlier this week or last week, and he said, look, why don't we know details about those cases against the students that basically were holding hostages on one of the campuses because they hate Jews? Like, what? Why not? And that would be my question now. We want to see the details of the cases against these people after they arrest them. Make sure that the penalty is applied to them with the full force of the law.
Yeah, we should deport people who are a threat to our country. Also, there's security concerns here. Why was this allowed to happen? How did this start? And why were so many people allowed to protest in Trump Tower to this degree? So I have concerns about that. But also, these people are so delusional, so dumb. To wear shirts that say fight Nazis, you are supporting the Nazis, you morons. You're supporting Hamas, who committed the largest attack on the Jews, the deadliest attack on the Jews since the Holocaust on October 7th. So these people are just so stupid, so delusional. to wear those shirts when they're the ones supporting Nazis.
They're hateful, and now they're being held to account, at least on this day. We'll see what happens further with the law, but they're being arrested, pulled out of the Trump Tower right now. And that, just so you know, Fifth Avenue is one of the places in New York City that is iconic. Tourists go there, and can you imagine now, you can't gain access. All those businesses have to halt what they were doing as they bring out more of these. I don't even call them protesters. They were occupying Trump Tower. By the way, at one point they were chanting the right to live in freedom. The right to live in freedom. What about Jewish Americans? What about everybody on the streets right now of New York City near here on Fifth Avenue? What about people who are watching this? They have a right to live in freedom. Ari.
Yeah, I would like to hear two New York's leaders, Hakeem Jeffries, the leader of the House, a Democrat from New York City, and Senator Chuck Schumer, also a New Yorker, the leader of the Democrats in the Senate. What are they going to say about this? Will they condemn this? Or will they kowtow to the pro-Hamas wing of the Democratic Party? This is what we talked about earlier. All the energy of the Democratic Party, the modern Democratic Party, is from this far left base. It is time for them to condemn this protest and be anti-Hamas.
They won't condemn this. I'm just going to predict that. We've seen them defend Mahmoud Khalil, many people in their party. You know, look at this. This, for people who haven't been to Trump Tower, you see the bike rack, and that's there intentionally. That's there because the President of the United States owns this building. It is a threatened building in many ways. These protesters would have had to have gone through metal detectors. That's at least how it's been for several years. If you went in there to meet with anyone in Trump world, you had to go through a metal detector. So many of these individuals, to Lisa's point, how did they get in? They're wearing masks. We now see them being arrested with zip ties. You know, are they hiding their identity? We know this report came out from Axios that they're using AI technology to identify these people. And they specifically want to know, were any of these people arrested during the Biden administration and not deported? So this mask helps obscure that AI technology. But Harris, that point you made, I picked up on that too, when they said the right to live in freedom. And my head immediately went to kibbutz near Oz, where Yarden and Shiri Bibas were trying to live peacefully with their family, with their 9-month-old Kafir, with their 4-year-old Ariel. They were thinking about moving, according to reports, because it felt unsafe. And instead, Hamas kidnapped them, killed the 2 little babies, killed the wife, and that dad is living alone without his family. They had a right to live in freedom. You spoiled students. Many of you look as if you're students. You're living in freedom. Welcome to the United States of America, where you can peacefully say what you want. But you cannot support terrorism and be here on a student visa. You cannot support the kidnappers of Shiri, of Kafir, of Ariel, and of Yarden. You cannot support them and be here. It's a privilege to be in this country on a student visa. You guys live in freedom. Who doesn't are the people of Israel.
Well, look, I appreciate you taking it back to October 7th because, honestly, Emily, we don't talk about it enough. So this is inside. We'll get back to that point in a moment. This is live inside Trump Tower. So this is playing out on the inside of a building of President Trump's. We don't know if there's anyone that he knows who's home in those residences right now. I mean, that's part of the story that we don't have. But what we know right now is that people are being taken out with NYPD officers escorting them out. Kaylee mentioned the zip ties. You know, as you see this play out, Emily, this can't just come to a few protesters picked up to stop the melee and they get let go. What can they be held on? What can they be charged with? How tough does the district attorney, what latitude does he have legally here?
Well, just a reminder that in Alvin Bragg's day one memo, he said he wouldn't prosecute, quote, low-level misdemeanor offenses, which includes trespass. He specifically articulated that unless it was part of a larger felony case. So if we had a district attorney here in Gotham City that actually had a vertebrae, then I would propose that, yes, they would find a constellation of charges, that they would absolutely bake trespass into larger felony cases of, you know, alignment with terrorism and whatever else. I don't care. Pick a ton. But the reality is, I am sure, as we see the massively affable way that these protesters are submitting to the arrest means that there's no way you can tie it to resisting arrest. We've seen them. I mean, it's sort of like watching someone try to lift a mannequin. Like, they're very pliable. So I don't see resisting being any part of this, which is a positive because obviously the safety and security of our law enforcement is penultimate. Yes. But at the end of the day, the building owner should press charges, right? We know who that is, but I don't know what the DA is going to do. And what this shows me is that all of these individuals who clearly don't have jobs, as they're out there on a Thursday morning enjoying vandalism and breaking and entering and all the things, what I see is the movement around Free Mahmoud should be replaced with a movement of Free Adon.
Restock. Oh, let's go to this live for a press conference by the police.
Today, there was a 911 call for about 150 to 200 protesters that went inside of Trump Towers, where they came in. They had regular jackets on. They took off their jackets and they had shirts, all red shirts. I don't have the exact same of the shirts. The police department will be giving an update in a minute. And they sat downstairs. They all sat downstairs, and they were chanting "Free Palestine" and a couple other things. Police department immediately called the guy here. They followed their procedures. They got a complaint from the building, and they started to make arrests. Police department did a phenomenal job. Chief Shell was on the scene. Chief Shell was took over the operation to make sure that everybody was safe, and we had our legal team here, making sure that we were legally sound, as opposed to when we were taking these individuals into custody.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, can you?
The police department will give an update on what happens in a little bit, but we are happy to report that there's no injuries and all of the protesters that are inside of Trump Towers have been removed.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, you're live on Fox News. We're talking with Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, Cass Daughtry. Mr. Deputy Mayor, do you know how many protesters were arrested? And can you describe for our viewers elsewhere in the country who may not know the process that the NYPD does in order to get them on the buses and process?
This is the NYPD will go into a little more depth about this, but like I said before, Chief Shell, the incident commander, is on the scene, and just when the police department comes in and makes arrests, they take the name down. They got to walk them to the bus. They stand on line. They literally memorialize everybody that's been taken into custody. So as you can see behind me, if you notice that people are still waiting to get on a bus because they are matching that suspect, the prisoner, up with the arresting officer, so that there's no issues when they get into the mass arrest processing center.
Are you concerned at all about the public's profile of Trump Tower, in that they were able to get in small groups and then reveal themselves with their protesting red T-shirts?
And you know what? When I did brief the mayor about 10 minutes ago, he literally expressed that concern to me, and later on today we're going to have a conference call with the police commissioner and as well as PD folks to find out what happened so this cannot happen again.
Yeah, well, my understanding is that when Barron is there in school, he is staying at Trump Tower. I'm not sure whether or not he was actually there today or not, but you're right. The Trump Tower is a commercial property, but it is also half a residential property. And, because of that, what these people decided to do was probably very frightening to a lot of people who live there, who work there. But I just want to give a real quick shout out to the NYPD. The police officers, who responded today were absolutely fantastic. They got things under control very quickly, and I think they took a situation that could have gotten out of hand and pared it back. But the question you asked about where the funding is coming from, I think is so important, because I think people look at this and take a look at that crowd right there. All the people in matching shirts with these signs that are not homemade signs, a lot of them. These are printed out. There's got to be funding behind doing something like this, and it seems like the same people who have been funding all the chaos on campuses that have been terrifying to Jewish students, that have prevented people from going and learning, are probably the same people funding this, probably the same people who funded the Summer of Love protests, of course, we all remember. And this is very upsetting, I think, to a lot of people to see. But what they're protesting there for, really, they're allowed to protest. You're not allowed to disrupt. You're not allowed to scare people in the place that they live. And, the guy in question does not have a right. It is a privilege to have a green card and a visa in the United States of America. So I think they're probably going to be very upset with the outcome.
It's certain. It's not just probable. It's certain, Laura. We know who was funding this. We know who funds Jewish Voices for Peace. We know where other instances they have funded. And if it flashed across the screen and the audience didn't get to fully internalize it, we can put it up once again as we speak. The funding behind that is vast, and it is repetitive. We've seen it over and over. Open Society Foundation, Rockefeller Brothers Foundation. We see who funds these types of protests. And it should be exposed for the entire public to know. This is not just a spontaneous outburst of support. This is a professionally funded protest. It is theater. What did that theater mean? Do you know? Have you spoken to anybody? I know the president is in Washington, D.C. Have you spoken to Melania? Have you spoken to Barron?
I haven't spoken to them. I spoke to my husband earlier. Obviously, he runs the Trump Organization, which is run there out of Trump Tower for the most part. And, you know, it is under control and everybody feels a lot better about things. But I think overall, the goal that these people have, I think is a little confusing to a lot of people. If your goal is to get folks on your side and to, you know, create something that's going to make people want to join you, this is probably not the way to do it. It wasn't just Trump Tower. You know, Fifth Avenue there in New York City has a whole host of different businesses up and down. They were all disrupted. Their days were disrupted. The tourists that come through there also couldn't access anything. So it's a shame that things came to this. I imagine, though, Will, this is probably not the last we're going to see of this. I hope that once we deport a couple of people, a couple of bad apples, the message is delivered very clearly to these people, but we'll see.
I suspect you're probably right. This isn't the last. When something's professional and organized and theater, it tends to look for sequels, looks for a replay of that exact same incident.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.